Good evening, everyone. Andrew asked me to just send a video just with a quick explanation, especially pursuant to the talk the other day regarding sourcing, whether it's permissible, whether how to become compliant with the Estate Agency Affairs Act or the Property Practitioners Act. I still maintain that becoming compliant is still first prize because most of the other strategies around it carry some form of risk to it. So take, for example, just a basic back-to-back or on-sale agreement. That doesn't carry any risk. It's a great strategy, but sometimes it may carry an additional cost of transfer duty. Granted, if the property is under R1 million, transfer duty isn't an issue in those circumstances, so that's a great thing. So just bear that in mind. But if it is over R1 million, you may need to transfer the property twice: once from the seller to yourself, and from yourself to the third-party buyer. But the question was particularly around information sourcing. It was an alternative that I discussed, and I explained that you don't need total compliance with the Estate Agency Affairs Act if you're not brokering a deal in terms of the definition of estate agent, in terms of the specific act, or even in terms of the Property Practitioners Act. The problem is that insofar as this is a strategy, whether it's a sound strategy, especially from a long-term perspective, is questionable, because you can maybe get away with one of these, but the more you start doing it, the more you realize that you get more involved. And by virtue of this, you may find that somebody at some point raises issue with how much information you're giving. So remember, when I speak about information sourcing, you can't look at the most extreme situation, because that's where the gray area kind of comes in and you start bordering on non-compliance. So maybe let's start right at the bottom. At the bottom being very basic information. So I'm sitting at home, I realize that my neighbor wants to sell his property, and maybe over a braai we have a conversation, or over the wall, or whatever people do nowadays, and we have a chat. He goes, oh, he wants to sell his property, he needs the money quick, what can he do? And I go, oh, well, I'm not sure, but I know a couple of guys that love buying properties. I'll hand over your number to them, and there we go. And I hand over the number, maybe a little, oh, thank you, 5,000 Rand, 10,000 Rand, 20,000 Rand, whatever the fee is gets paid. There's very little brokering that actually happens there. It's simply the passing on of information, of a lead. It's a marketing lead for all intents and purposes. So it's going back to the question on whether some of these websites that simply generate leads should be registered as estate agents, which a lot of them clearly are not. So if you almost act as a lead generator, that's still okay. If you negotiate a purchase price, you take it up a notch and you start getting closer to that gray area. So your neighbor tells you, you know what, I want to sell it for R1 million. Yeah, whatever, let's go for it. And you say, you know what, I've seen the properties in this area, R1 million a bit much. 900 Rand would probably be the best, but whatever, it's completely up to you. You hand over the phone number to your friends at Sappin. All right, there you're starting to get a bit closer to the gray area, but maybe not yet. You haven't done anything more than that. But you see, as I start elaborating more on the story, and as I start doing more and more to actually close a deal, so now I'm convincing the purchaser that he should make the offer for 900,000. Now it starts getting on advisory. You're telling the purchaser what you think the purchaser should do. Next thing you know, you're carrying the offer to purchase from the purchaser through to the seller. And the more you do, the closer it becomes to acting like an estate agent. And that's why I said this isn't a sustainable way of really doing things. It's probably easier to just be compliant or do it through an agency or a brokerage. But if you are going to need to do it, it is minimal information. You're not sourcing, you're not packaging, you're not putting together and negotiating and putting in an OTP. You're simply passing on information from one person to the other. So the question that Andrew asked me was around how then the strategy would be implemented through the use of an OTP, and the short answer is it can't, because it's two completely different strategies. The one, you're simply passing information from A to B. If you're submitting an offer, and then you're taking this offer, you're going to new people and convincing them to step into that role. and pay you a commission for it, you're brokering. You've made an offer, you've negotiated the price, you've negotiated certain terms and conditions, you're taking it through to a new purchaser. You're probably going to negotiate for him to step into your shoes through possibly the signing of a new agreement. For all intents and purposes, being paid a commission for that is yeah, it falls within the ambit or the scope of the act, and therefore makes that conduct unlawful. So unfortunately, those two strategies don't coincide with each other. They are mutually exclusive. If you are going to be making an offer, you're stepping into the field. If you make an offer and you on-sell the property to somebody else and there's a transfer to them, that's totally legit. There's nothing wrong with that, right? And then you submit your offer, you have sure there's good suspensive conditions that buy you enough time to be able to find a purchaser that you can sell the property to. That's perfectly fine. There's no issue with that. But if you're using the OTP simply to buy time so you can then find someone, cancel the OTP, and get somebody else to make an offer, you're not strictly speaking trying to act like an estate agent, but the effective result is that you are. By signing an offer, you're effectively almost securing a mandate without the seller realizing what that mandate entails. And then you're going out finding a purchaser and then trying to convince the seller to take the purchaser's offer on top of yours or beyond yours. So I'm hoping that that kind of clarifies the two different strategies. But yeah, if any questions at all, please feel free to ask.